thank you for joining us today. My name is Linda Bonyo. I am the founder of the Lawyers Hub. It's a really, really good day. I hope you are having a good one. If you aren't, just say it's a good day. It's going to be a good day when you say it. Grateful that you could join us in today. As usual, every Monday we have, policy discussions on artificial intelligence strategies across the African continent. That is Lawyers Hub under the Africa AI Policy Lab. You can check out our work at aipolicy.africa to see the work that we do. I'd also invite you to join us in Nairobi this August for the Africa Law and Technology Festival, which is happening on the 9th and the 10th of August in Nairobi. You'll be with us. Let's discuss different things that are happening, emerging issues within the domain of law and technology. But most importantly, we will be in Geneva for the Global AI Dialogue. And we want to invite you to be with us in Geneva in July, between the 5th and the 10th of July. You can find the link, I think, on the chat, but also on our website. You'll be able to see exactly, what's going on and, what we're up to with these particular strategies. And so today we are very happy and excited to be discussing the strategy by Mauritius, the national AI strategy that was launched this April. We'll get a basic or foundational knowledge of this Mauritius AI strategy and then quickly go into comments from our panelists, what they think, what it takes, what it misses, opportunities that they see, and then we'll be able to ask questions at the end. So if you have a question, I will ask you to raise your digital hand. We'll have you speak, and then you can let us know where you are from. So we are really grateful that you could join us this morning. Abdul Rashid from Djibouti, I see you, thank you. Karen from Nakuru, thank you so much. Tukero Olekina from Malindi, I am appreciative of you being here today. Benedict Okang from Ghana, thank you so much. And Eunice Madenge as well from Nairobi. We appreciate everyone who's joined us in today. We don't take it for granted. And so I would ask my media team to just share the slides. We'll have very quick 10 slides. Once they're done, you will know that we are done, and then we will go into the Q&A. The idea is that we have a basis in which we argue from, because we know that reading these documents is not easy. And so we'll take some time. So Mauritius launched its national AI strategy, and we've read it carefully against several benchmarks that we have done. If you've been here with us, we've discussed AI strategies from South Africa, even though it's been withdrawn now. And last week, they appointed a new committee to draft its new strategy. We also discussed Ghana, Kenya's AI bill, as well as Zimbabwe's. And so today, Mauritius, we're talking about what their AI strategy means and whether it is aligned with most of the AI strategies within the African continent. And so today we want to talk about, one, its vision and architecture. It's very human-centric. It's ethical. It keeps talking about, responsible artificial intelligence. And it's based on 5 pillars, which is innovation, skills, infrastructure, governance, and the public sector. Also, it talks about priority, a priority list, which is on foundations, on skills, on research, on productivity, public services, and also international engagement. And this, we see that there's a 5-pillar list, but the 6 priority list, they sort of do not align, and we have questions about that. So we'll kind of see what this means. We saw this with the South African draft where there was some inconsistency. And then in terms of governance, it's hybrid. So it doesn't take like only one approach. And it discusses why it doesn't take only one approach. So it takes about a principle-based risk proportionate approach. So for example, an AI unit has been established within the Ministry of ICT, which is concerned around, the strategy. A National AI Council is referenced as to be constituted. If you look at the backdrop, Mauritius already had a 2018 draft, which we'll talk about here on whether they're consistent or not. And a National AI Council draft was already referred to in 2018. So what does this actually mean? And then also in terms of ethics, it gives the 9 pillars for the ethics of its national AI strategy, which is its legality, purpose limitation, transparency, and explainability. It also talks about human oversight and accountability, including fairness and non-discrimination. Also, data principles like privacy and data minimization, as well as security and resilience, but also auditability and traceability. So it sounds really like we want to know what's happening rather than we want you to come invest. So that's one of the things that we notice about this in terms of inclusivity and accessibility, but also redress. And so this strategy is launched together with the FAIR guidelines. The FAIR guidelines simply just means fairness, accountability, integrity, inclusion, and responsibility. So it sort of operationalizes the national strategy as a companion document. So it's important that we read those two together. But also, just to note, Mauritius launched its strategy, its blueprint, national blueprint, not too long ago, less than a year ago. And so this national blueprint is the same document we also reference to. I believe a link is on the chat. They really have a clean spreadsheet on where you can, access this particular document. So on my third slide, I just want to talk about, comparison between Mauritius and Kenya and what it looks like. So Mauritius doesn't really give dated milestones like the Zimbabwe gave, which was very specific on where is the milestone, who's in charge, what time. So that's really interesting about that. And it hasn't gotten into Kenya's, level where Kenya already has a bill in this case. So only 3 countries right now are discussing AI bills. And we compare it also to Ghana. Ghana had a financing architecture. It already talked about a fund, National AIC fund, which was 5 billion cedis. So this is silent on this. We would like to ask our panelists why, if they have any thoughts around it. But then also Zimbabwe mentioned computational sovereignty. So as people are talking about sovereignty and the principle of Ubuntu, we don't see Ubuntu here, but we see ways in which people are elevated. For example, the Mauritius national strategy talks about PPP, which is public-private, and then says people. So that's not something I think that Kenya looks at. Kenya looks at public-private partnerships, but not necessarily the P being people. So that's something that is interesting to discuss today. But then also, it's also interesting to talk about institutional ambitions in terms of how does the institutions look like, within this strategy. We've seen other countries where they are forming new, institutions to ensure that we implement this. So what are the 3 lessons that we can ideally learn? On my slide, what we can learn about Mauritius and what we see it as. Kenya's AI bill, for example, the penalties were weak. There was no general purpose AI regime. But when we look at Mauritius, we see that already within its strategy is talking about a national AI council. So it sits within the executive. You see maybe the kind of power that has been given within this, but also that may be a vulnerability. We also see in terms of costing, it does not cost exactly what this means compared to Ghana. But also in terms of architecture, we see that, for example, Zimbabwe introduced councils, registers, and this sort of model documentation. So Mauritius does not introduce this within the strategy, but accompanying it is the FAIR guidelines, which then talks about this. But we must note that the FAIR guidelines are only guidelines. They say that this is not regulation, and so nobody should see it as a regulation, but we see it as soft law, in this sense. So on the next slide, we talk about some recommendations that we could look at in terms of one, the council, because this has been spoken about since 2018. How has it looked like on paper, but also in practice? And so we'll get this from Mauritius, from our panelists, but also in terms of recommendation, how much can you cost this? If the strategy is between 2026 to 2029, is there a range that they're looking at in terms of numbers that they want to invest in this? But also we need to discuss about soft law, really releasing a national AI strategy and then guidelines without an accompanying statute. Is that a good practice? And compare this to Kenya, where we had the national strategy and then a bill came out of the way. What do you think about the soft law approach from the national AI strategy? But also it will be important that we look at, upstream obligations around transparency, training data, incident reporting. So regardless of this, Mauritius really could be able to, set a standard from what they mention in their FAIR guidelines. But also we look at continental powers. Mauritius really compares itself to national global standards. If you compare the 2018 draft and this 2026 draft, it's now mentioning OECD, UNESCO principles. It talks about everything that's happening globally and trying to align to that without necessarily being harsh and hard on everyone else in the world. So we want to see where they're preparing this from, and they discuss within the strategy exactly where their hybrid approach comes from. So it acknowledges the EU approach, which is horizontal regulation, which cuts across industries. It also highlights the China approach, which cuts across the vertical, which is look for a sector and then speak about that sector and regulate specific things like recommendation algorithms and things like that without necessarily having a law. So we think that those are some interesting things to talk about within this. The Mauritius strategy has really great recommendations on training, including an AI center of excellence, but also looks at how to reach the people that are far off, that do not have internet in this case. So what about the approach? The argument that AI law is premature. This is within the draft. They don't know a lot, and they have to wait for this sort of international convergence within the draft. And so it's a very careful draft. I don't know whether it's geared towards having more investments in Mauritius, because that's what Mauritius has been known for. And what's the political risk in coming up with this approach? We also looked at, how does Mauritius compare to non-African AI strategies? For example, Singapore, which is principle-based, it's sector-led approach, but it is paired with an AI verified foundation and a substantially larger compute envelope. So the compute envelope, Mauritius is silent on that. And also what happens when, the AI Council is not, National AI Council is not convened. What about the political momentum? And at this point, I'd like to also talk about, what, could happen in terms of closing. We think that this strategy gets several things right. But then also there's challenges with this particular strategy in terms of timelines, in terms of budgeting and costing, but also in terms of approach. Where exactly does it stand? So we've looked at what has happened in terms of, let's say, the continent. People are building for other jurisdictions. We don't necessarily compare to the Africa AI strategy that the African Union launched. What does this mean for, everyone, especially Mauritius in this sense? We also look at, some actions that needs to be taken. One is on, upstream obligations. What do you do with foundational models around transparency for tech companies? But in conclusion, Mauritius wants to position itself as the Indian Ocean and SADC Bridge document. Like it's a model regulation for, Indian Ocean like countries and small islands. And it talks about its smallness in this sense, but then also saying that it's actually a great place to invest. So we have given you a general overview of what the strategy looks like, but also I must add that they introduced something called DIVA, the Digital Interactive Virtual Assistant, as the default 24/7 citizen interface across all government mobile services. So consider it like the Ghana one. Ghana had a Ghana chart that they're going to introduce. And so we see this as something that's also consistent in all these strategies where the government is trying to build its own digital infrastructure or digital place to offer e-services within the national AI strategies. There's a lot in the draft. I invite you to read it, but would like today to, speak to our panelists and hear, they have better context about Mauritius that they would want to talk about today. And also you have questions, we need time to discuss. And so I'm going to start with my first panelist, who's here, to give us, recommendations on what they see as a gap, what they see as an opportunity, what they still see as, the way forward and the context, because reading a document while being an outsider, you miss so much. And you may not be able to tell what this ideally means. And so my first, you just excuse me, the gods of presentation have got me today. Just about to open something. Feel free to speak to your neighbor like they do in church and say, this is who I am, as I find this particular documentation. Thank you so much. Thanks for your patience. And so, yeah, I'd like to invite our first speaker. He has very few minutes to speak, but I want to invite Dr. Suraj, who is a senior lecturer in computing at Middlesex University, Mauritius, and has been involved in research surrounding big data in the health sector. As part of doctoral work towards optimizing data quality. He was also the chairperson of the Mauritius Emerging Technologies Council, whose main focus was to advise the government on emerging tech. So his, doctoral research really has discussed on data governance, focused on data quality, and he continued to work with counterparts in the UK around all these particular issues on the impact of use of AI and what big data could look like. He's currently leading a research team where one of the research areas is on non-technical aspects of AI, specifically upon small island states. And this strategy really speaks about small island states. He's been involved in international consultancies around AI with bodies such as UNESCO, UNDP, and the Global Index for Responsible AI. And so, Dr. Suraj, please feel free to let us know in maybe the next 5 minutes what your thoughts are on the strategy, what we are missing. We'll be happy to hear your thoughts. The floor is yours. And thanks for honoring us with your presence today.
Yes, thank you, Linda, and thank you for having me on. I commend you for your like a very precise kind of and very enlightening kind of the description of the strategies, the new AI strategy and its fair guideline. Okay, I think you are right. The strategy, maybe let me start from the beginning. Basically, the strategy really is some kind of should be some kind of alignment with the blueprint, okay, with the digital blueprint which was released last year, okay. And as you rightly pointed out, there is an enabler in the blueprint around AI governance, okay. Now, strategy is really something which discusses about, I would say, quite expected things from a small like island as Mauritius, because you must understand that Mauritius is not an AI producer country. Like most countries, it's not an AI producer country. Especially in the short term, we would expect the country to be more of some kind of AI adopter country. And the strategy is really about how, let's say, best to adopt AI and to try to look at what needs to be present in order to be able to do so in the most in the most efficient way, I may say. Okay, so that's why you would see typical things like talking about data, talking about training, talking about compute, which is some kind of challenge for industry players here. Okay, but you see, I see the strategy really good in terms of its kind of overall kind of direction. Okay. However, you rightly pointed out that there is some kind of lack of actually more precise details about monitoring, about evaluation, about budget, about ownership, who needs to do what. And for example, what kind of benefits would be happening if there is some kind of AI center of excellence? How is it going to be constituted? Okay, who is going to benefit from it, from what aspect, and so on. These are things that are not actually very well detailed in the new AI strategy. Okay, One thing which I see is let's say completely lacking from the strategy is a lack of discussion upon AI sovereignty. Okay, because in the short term we would expect more of adoption, but as you know, most and I've been in mainland Africa in many talks, most countries they want to not to depend upon big tech and other organizations. Okay, so where does this strategy start to position us in terms of AI sovereignty? There is some talk about data sovereignty, there is some talk about cloud sovereignty, but not enough talk about AI sovereignty. So for me, this is something which is lacking in the strategy. But I've been hearing also that there will be some kind of annex document, okay, which is going to like complement implementation aspects. So most probably we should be waiting for those annex documents to come in before being able to give more, let's say, precise kinds of interpretations of the strategy. Coming out towards a fair guideline, uh, again, the FAIR guideline is supposed to be like condensing the discussions around ethical and responsible AI. And again, I think it's a very good document. It discusses those kinds of, it's a guideline. Okay, the title is correct here. It's a guideline. But when I read this, and I try to say, for example, it's talking about the tiering process. And when I read it properly, sometimes it might be confusing, okay, to distinguish what is some kind of, like a medium risk AI and what is some kind of high risk AI, okay? So when I read those definitions in the FAIR guideline, I see there could be some kind of overlap, there could be some kind of ambiguity coming in. And the accent here being a guideline, the accent is upon people adopting AI to put into place their own activities, their own processes in order to actually make sure that AI is being used or deployed in the most ethical and responsible way. How far this would work, uh, knowing that there are lots of guidelines which already existed and which are like almost repetitive to what the FAIR guideline is saying. And I know that many industry players have already adopted their own kinds of guidelines. So at the end of the day, what is a FAIR guideline actually giving more compared to existing guidelines? This is a question that I ask, and I would end up here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Suraj. You make very pertinent points. And I agree with you on, I looked at the draft and I was looking at what's very unique about Mauritius, and especially for the draft. And I can tell what's unique about every national AI strategy that we've read and across the African continent. So, for example, when you talk about costing, who's in charge, who is named, who needs to do what, I think Zimbabwe really did a great job at this. You read the draft and you have no doubt who you need to talk to on what level. So I appreciate that. But I also think that Mauritius is trying to be everything for everyone. Because it's not its own citizens. It's Mauritius suffers the same fate as Kenya, where you have this all global companies, people come in to set up, and so you want something that does not, really annoy them, something that says something but does not say it. So that's the general feeling that I got from reading this strategy. And also, it does the usual regulatory sandbox. We're going to do this. But I don't really get the uniqueness around Mauritius. And I'm curious to understand also the background of what happened in 2018 and the draft. Is this a second wave of the national AI strategy, or the 2018 was just a report? So I keep asking that question on what really happened, because the OECD names the 2018 draft as a national AI strategy. And so what shifted? Is this the second wave and amendment of that draft? I don't know if you have any of the answers, but also would want to say that I think you're really right on the benefits and the positioning. That's really not clear for it to be in the strategy. Yeah, and this strategy was, I think, supported by UNDP or UNESCO. I'm not sure. There's a word from the country office. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. What I know is that it was supported partially from UNDP.
yeah,
UNESCO, there was some kind of, like UNESCO RAM methodology which was done in
yeah.
2023, which it refers to sometimes. But coming back to your point about the transition from the 2018 strategy, okay? No, when you read the 2018 strategy, it was more some kind of discussion about use cases, uh, where where can Mauritius be using AI, okay? And basically there was, since so many years, there was not so many kind of actual, activity coming out of the 2018 strategy. I think one of the only thing that I know was the creation of the, METC, Mauritius Emerging Technology Council, instead of the MAIC. Okay, yeah, uh, and since then, there has been so many changes in the technologies that basically there needed to be some kind of more adapted kind of strategy. And I think in that sense, it is very correct. The strategy, as you rightly said, contains whatever you would expect. When you read so many of the national AI strategies, there are also the things about trying to fill the skills gap, trying to make sure that there is enough compute, trying to make sure that data is ready, and so on. As you said, the kind of usual things. Okay, but there is some kind of gap between the vision and the execution. And basically, this is what is a bit unclear. How now do you use it for execution? Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have thoughts around computing and what it does with compute, where exactly this is going, how it's going to look like. But we'll come back to you right before the Q&A. Thank you so much, Dr. Suraj. I'd want to invite my next speaker. If you're joining us, please feel free to use the chat and the Q&A section. We're really happy to have you today. With us today, we want to introduce Mohamed Faleh Soche. It depends on how you pronounce your K and Y. He's an AI strategy and digital transformation practitioner with over 20 years of experience helping organizations really translate technology into measurable business value. He's the director of AI strategy and transformation at DTG Labs Limited and a doctoral candidate researching AI readiness and AI adoption among SMEs. And so I would be, keen to hear, Mohammed, what, this rings a bell for you, your experience on the same. And what you think maybe Mauritius could do better. And where's the opportunity? Because we have people in the room who are business people, wondering where is the business opportunity for me within the strategy? Because the strategy tells you where the country is actually going.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you for the invitation. Personally, I think Mauritius is trying to do something very unique, and
Just
it
to
is
say
a
that we
very
can't see your video. If it's deliberate, it's okay. If not, just put it on.
no.
Thank you.
I think I'm having some issue with the camera right
Okay,
now.
no
Yeah.
worries.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that the Mauritius National AI Strategy is a very important milestone for the country. It is true that we talk about the 2018 AI strategy and now the recently launched one. Um, but the new version is a bit more about the national capability, whereas the 2018 was mostly where AI can be used, and it was focused mostly about AI opportunities by sector. And for this strategy, I'm not saying it's perfect because no strategy is, but for me, it signals something bigger. It suggests that Mauritius is no longer treating AI simply as a technology discussion. No, Mauritius is trying to become a passive consumer of AI. But Mauritius is trying to position itself as AI as part of a broader economic and institutional transformation agenda. And what I'm saying is that if you're going to look at the national AI strategy in isolation, it will be very difficult. We'll find many gaps in it. But when you look at the strategy together with the FAIR guidelines and the AI playbook, they start looking more like different stages of the same adoption journey. That is important because globally, many countries are becoming increasingly good at producing AI ambitions and policy direction. But where momentum often slows down is when those ambitions need to become visible inside operations. And for me, from a practitioner point of view, that is where implementation starts becoming the real discussion. Now, we need to know that Mauritius is entering that conversation from a relatively strong position. Okay, we already perform well across readiness indicators and currently rank first in government AI readiness in sub-Saharan Africa, which of course creates an encouraging foundation. But at the same time, we need to keep in mind that readiness at country level does not automatically mean readiness at an organizational level. In many ways, producing the strategy is probably the easier part. But moving from one part, like Dr. Jadu said, moving from ambition to execution, this is where the real work begins. And from what I'm seeing in practice, ambition, readiness, and implementation do not always progress at the same pace. And that distinction becomes particularly visible with SMEs because many organizations still appear to be operating primarily within the digitization phase. To be frank, I don't see that as a weakness. I see it as a reminder for all that transformation really happens in one jump. So for me, the challenge now is finding ways to reduce the gap between digital readiness and AI readiness in Mauritian SMEs so that the SMEs can move forward without being left behind. And that is why I believe Mauritius need to avoid creating an artificial separation between digital transformation and AI transformation. For many organizations, AI should not become something that starts after digitization is complete. Instead, AI should progressively become embedded into modernization efforts, transformation efforts, so that organization can start creating value while they transform, right? And one thing I would like to add, when it comes to the FAIR guidelines, it becomes particularly interesting for me because operationalizing FAIR guidelines is less about producing governance documents and more about helping organization make better implementation decisions. A question around, for example, ownership, data, oversight, and accountability start becoming implementation decisions rather than governance discussion. That is usually where the governance stops becoming theory and starts becoming operational. So at the
Excellent.
same time, yeah, at the same time, we need
I'm giving
to,
you a minute more.
yeah, okay, I'll just end it. At the same time, I believe that implementation will not happen automatically, nor we will have the full guidelines of how to implement it. At the end of the day, success will depend on whether organization continue building capability, improving execution, and make governance practical enough to scale. Because if we are going to put all the governance protocols, all the rules, all the policies at the beginning itself, we'll be suffocating the industry. Because
Yeah,
in practice, access to AI does not automatically create transformation. Organizations still need to absorb change. Yeah, that's for
excellent.
me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mohammed. I really appreciate that. And I think it's useful for us to also maybe talk about, the value of the FAIR guidelines is it really establishes some sort of ethical framework on which the strategy rests, what a country believes in inclusion, accountability, which is really great. And maybe the question is from everyone else, why not just have it as part of the national AI strategy that talks about your ethics and what you believe and what fairness looks like and accountability? and maybe make this together with the playbook, that everything else, came together to really have a formidable AI strategy. But I also understand that different countries want to be different things to different people. And so I think the value for this conversation is to see the uniqueness and that positioning. And so now we go to our final speaker, who will make a few points on what they think about this particular strategy. Today I have really difficult names, but I have Rigesh Futa, who is a director of AI and innovation with more than 20 years of experience in tech, innovation, and digital transformation. He's worked across Africa, Europe, and the Middle East and the US, advising organizations on how to leverage emerging tech to drive strategic outcomes. He's also contributed to national level initiatives around AI and governance, and he serves on advisory committees focused on innovation, competitiveness, and responsible AI. And he's really big on how to bridge this gap between strategy and execution, also with strong emphasis on ethics and practical applications of AI. So how do we get to implementation, Rigesh? And do you think that this is, something, is a great strategy? Can it be implemented? And what do you see as the gaps, but also the opportunities for everyone else who, I know people in the room who want to set up in Mauritius. People ask us all the time, do I set up in Mauritius also, or in Delaware? So you are one of those, places where people want to do this. What do you think, Rigesh?
Thanks. Thank you, Linda, for the question, and thank you for the invitation. Can you hear me properly, just to be sure? Yeah, great. It's a great question, but I just wanted to bring one correction to my fellow countryman, Mohammed Sukai. He actually mentioned that Mauritius was first in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of AI readiness. That was 2 years ago. We are now third in terms of AI readiness from the Oxford Insights report, and hopefully the strategy will get us back on track for us to become first. But to answer your question more on the implementation side, so I was lucky enough to work on both sides, as well in government, trying to implement policies in place, and as now in private sector driving the AI agenda within companies, private sector. And one of the things that I do very regularly in my conversation as panelists or presenting in conferences is I run live polls with executives, and I ask them, how is AI adoption going on right now? And I always ask very simple questions like, is it common in your organization? Are you still exploring use cases? Are you still figuring out where to start? And as of now, one thing has come up very concretely in Mauritius, at least, approximately between 70 to 75% of companies are still exploring use cases and not even moving beyond that. And it's a good signal, which means AI is on the agenda of everyone, but at the same time, it's not yet fully, I would say, adopted or mainstream in the country. And it will be in the future to come. Now, you see, when you have a strategy, it's one thing to have a strategy, it's another thing to implement the strategy. I believe it's a very good sign to have a strategy where you outline the vision, the direction, and the way you want things to move ahead. However, in order to materialize a strategy, you very thoroughly or digitally need to have measurable outcomes that you have as objective down the line. And I concur with what Dr. Jody was saying and what you yourself were saying before. We probably needed to see more of KPIs, measurable, tangible evidence of where we are right now and how would quantify and qualify success down the line. And I think this is what I see is missing in the strategy. When I compare it to other countries like Rwanda or even Zimbabwe, I think this is more detailed, explicit, and I probably wish we had more of that. And there's one example which I always like to refer to. I think we're all aware of what the UAE government announced very recently. In 2 years' time, so they give a timeline, they want to operationalize all processes in government through agentic AI. So in one sentence, they basically give you a timeline, the technology that they will use, and the purpose and the objective that they want to achieve. I just find that really great. So that's one example which I think we should all relate to and see how we can have ambition, at the same time try to put a timeline as objective, and obviously the means through which we will achieve it is what form of AI we will use. So I think having the strategy is a very good thing, but at the same time, getting it right, starting straight away. I believe first what I see here is in terms of AI readiness itself. As a country, while we did the AI readiness assessments with UNESCO, we probably need to do more of that for public sector and private sector. So understand that the basis of AI is actually data, and probably we should have focused a little bit on the data side and have a very efficient, thorough data strategy outlining how well we're going to structure our data, from data sovereignty to infrastructure to everything. So this is all the key ingredients which I believe should have been more focused on. Now, you see, when I speak to
Another
numerous of
minute.
my yeah, thank you. I'll just move to the FAIR guidelines. So having those guidelines are great, but again, they are guidelines, and I can tell you from working with companies here in Mauritius that they are too busy doing AI to actually consider the guidelines. And guidelines become problematic when you have deadlines, when you have objectives as well. So we might actually consider a source of enforcement down the line, and I believe should come as regulation in the coming years. Now, just to wrap up, from a geopolitical side, Mauritius has always positioned itself as a great place to invest money, and I believe that strategy is aligned to that, where there's no regulation on AI yet. However, it's increasingly saying, come to Mauritius and innovate in Mauritius. I believe this is the strong message out of the strategy. That's it on my side, Linda.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brikesh. It's interesting, the approach, because, initially when I read it, I was like, I'm not seeing any heaviness. I'm not seeing anybody saying, oh, big tech, oh, we are going to be this. But then it hits you on the way that this is why people choose Mauritius. Just to say, a few years ago, not years ago, from a year ago, a lot of Kenyan companies have actually moved to Mauritius. I know so many, even non-profits, who were not amazed by the tax regime that was, pushed by the current president. And so these are challenges and conversations that, we must talk about. So Mauritius looks like it has to continue being that safe haven to store money. So maybe I'll come when I get rich. So let's go to the Q&A. Thank you so much, Brikesh. And all the panelists now, we just want to go quickly to the Q&A. If you have a question, lift up your hand. We'll pick you to speak. And I think there's a lot of going on in the chat. I really appreciate what you say. Kosi Amesino, can we know the two important areas of AI implementation in your specific countries? I agree with this. There's an overgeneralization that it's education, healthcare, and agriculture within the continent. But also we've seen about financial architecture and transport from the Mauritius side. I think the 2018 draft talked about transport, but also now a lot of the financial fintech side. Lisa Russell, thanks for joining us from the artsenvoy.ai. And Olaimiki Oyebanji says Nigeria recently launched an AI chatbot for quick access to government policies. I think that mirrors what Mauritius wants with DIVA and what Ghana wants with Ghana Chat. And then Dennis Rafone says there's a lag between 2018 and now, reminds him of the Egyptian AI strategy 2, first draft in 2020 and then second draft in 2025. So we have like a second wave of what all these things are happening, Leonel Romanara from Smart Africa, based in Rwanda, also joining us today. Smart Africa has done some really great work on the blueprint, on the AI blueprint for the continent, which is mentioned in Ghana's strategy. And so I want us to, if you have any questions or comments or something that strikes it up for you, you have a few minutes or 30 seconds to lift up your hand, and I will give you the mic to speak or ask a question or make a comment. And then we'll proceed to get some closing remarks from our panelists. Anyone on the floor? Especially people in Mauritius, we'd love to hear from you. And thanks for joining us. There's been over, I think, 170 people who registered for this particular conversation, I think as of Friday. I don't know how it is now, but we really thank you for joining us today. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Okay, there's no question today. That's unusual. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and then I will go back to my panelist. Okay, so let's go to Dr. Suraj on compute. We didn't see any, strict things on compute and what that looks like. Do you think that could be better? I've been reading a bit about the push to data localization and digital sovereignty, and people saying we have to be sovereign, and then they just don't have the infrastructure for it. Shali Genga, you want to say something before we get to that question of sovereignty, compute, and data localization? Shali? Can we unmute her? I think there's a problem there. Shali, you're permitted to speak. Just go again. We didn't hear you.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you perfectly. Go on, Shali.
So this just goes to everyone. I'm just wondering, we've looked at a number of policies right now. What do you think is the biggest strength or contribution of this policy?
Yeah. That's a really good question. When lawyers talk about jurisprudence, going to court, it added to this. What did Mauritius add to the conversation that Africa has been having? We've seen, for example, Zimbabwe added to us Ubuntu. They were like, you know what? And diaspora, they were like, our continent has people abroad. They are coming back home to do this and this, So I think there's a contribution everywhere. Whether it's people saying, we want you to work here. For example, Mauritius really sounds like Kenya around attracting people to come to the continent. Without necessarily saying we want ours to go out or we want us to get the sovereignty. So it's like the Kenyan approach where you're a platform. Let other people come and play, let big tech players find a home. So really, I really want to understand what that contribution is. It may not be obvious, but it may be, the rich person in the room who just wants peace. So that the business environment is well taken care of. All my panelists, I think you can put your videos on or and just comment on this as we proceed. Dr. Suraj?
Yes, sorry. So many ideas coming in. I was still thinking, about all those things, you were asking about compute. Okay. Maybe just before that, I will just just add very quickly upon normally like during my studies what I've found about follow-ups upon policies and strategies. For example, when you look at some of the first countries to come up with AI strategies around 2016 2017, I'm talking about, for example, Germany and Canada. So they did some strategies, and basically at this point in time, because the technology is so new and was evolving even back at the time so quickly, that what they did, there were two pathways. Either there was an institution of some kind of AI committee or council for monitoring and feedback, or what was happening, and I think someone talk about the Egyptian case here. What was happening is that just after 2 or 3 years, there was a new updated version of the strategy. Okay, so this is just to say that very often implementation of the strategy is not part of the first draft, but it is left to some kind of forthcoming activity or forthcoming version based upon what has been happening. Okay, now coming to your discussions about compute. Okay, so compute, for my discussions with stakeholders in Mauritius, is some kind of a challenge. It's where data privacy is not such an issue, compute is still available through cloud, let's say cloud technology, but it's quite expensive, especially if you're using generative AI and you need to pay by token and so on. It can become really expensive, and it can become some kind of, investment and costing issue. Okay. To add to this, if now companies need to, let's say, comply with the existing data protection laws, which I would just add that maybe it's some kind of high time to also update this data protection law, like maybe align a bit with what UK is doing right now with the DUAA Act, some kind of a bit more AI friendly kind of act. It would be very helpful. It would help those organizations, I would say. But for those organizations who want to do like private AI kind of thing, they say that, having their own architecture or GPUs is a challenge, in terms of the supply chain and so on. So I know some organizations have been going out, maybe have been going to China and so on, and have been bringing their own GPUs. But you know that even China is having some issues in terms of, export and so on, and getting access to those to those tech. So compute is a problem in terms of getting it. It's also a problem in terms of, let's say, investment into it. Let's imagine Mauritius is investing into some kind of, I'm talking into some kind of AI focused data center. The question would be, would there be enough activity just in Mauritius to actually, have the right return on investment of it, or is it more, more valuable to do some kind of cooperation in the region or with Southern or Eastern Africa? So there are very broad questions coming into compute, which again, the strategy talks about it, but doesn't go into enough detail or directions about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Suraj. And I think that also, leads us to Nyabuto Milligan's question on, curious about the process or metrics preceding the operational definitions of fairness and inclusivity, especially from a data quality perspective. And we have to wrap it up now, but I want to ask, does Mauritius still remain this place where, everybody else invests in the AI age, or this was just a AI fad, Vrigesh and Mohammed, just very quick comments on, do you think that there's still, it's still an attractive place? Where is the AI capital going to? It's moving to Kenya, to South Africa, maybe to Nigeria, and Morocco. There's a lot of mention, I think, from the European companies on investing in Morocco. But I'm curious to hear what you see as still positioning Mauritius to have an advantage in the AI era. You have another 30 seconds or so.
Thanks. Very quick. While there's a global AI race, there's also an African AI race. I think everyone is legitimate to push ahead in that. From Morocco, we have been involved in the landscape, in Kenya as well, in South Africa. Mauritius has really, really attractive financial systems, financial rates, and that will remain on top of any industry that anyone wants to invest in, be it in AI or in anything else. If I'm not mistaken, we recently launched another scheme as well to attract more investors in that space. So let me confirm, from what I'm seeing, Mauritius is still a big attractive destination in technology, be it AI or anything else.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Vrigesh. And Mohammed, are you still here with us? You have a comment?
Yes, I'm still here.
Excellent. Yeah.
For me, I think AI may gradually change the FDI conversation, because traditionally investment often follow cost efficiency and market access. And if Mauritius is going the way they are projecting to, investors may increasingly look at digital infrastructure, maturity of institution, talent, and how quickly innovation can move into execution. That would create an interesting opportunity for Mauritius. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. The people in here who are saying, Mary Eleanor, who's joining us from Cameroon, really interested in AI in the sector of justice. We'll be happy to introduce you. Kenya just launched, there's a call for comments from the judiciary that now has AI policy, a draft AI policy framework, together with practice guidelines on artificial intelligence. Check it out. It will be something interesting to discuss. I'd also want to, highlight Nena, Nwakwama, who's talking about Sovereign AI in Health Summit, which is going to be happening in Kigali, September 30th to October 2nd, during the Africa Health Tech Summit in Kigali. So if you're interested, please get in touch with her and all that is happening. We hope that you can join us in Geneva. Last week, there was a call for travel support to go to Geneva. Check it out online. I'm not sure if the Heinrich Ball Foundation has closed for those who are interested in traveling during the Global AI Dialogue. AI for Good Summit is also happening the same week, as well as WSIS. So Geneva is the place to be if you're looking to engage on AI governance. And so we hope that you can join us. Just go to the UN page. It also has a request for travel support. So go and apply for travel support. If you need to, someone to support you and give you the letters to go in there, we'll be happy to make the recommendation. And so we really appreciate all the work that has gone into this conversation. I want to appreciate my team at the Lawyers Hub for making this conversation possible. Continue to engage with the FAIR guidelines, the playbook, as well as the National AI Strategy and the blueprint for Mauritius. I think it's a really great place for the lawyers in the house who are looking to help their clients set up in Mauritius. Those are documents you must read. We are not encouraging what lawyers used to do. You just tell clients you can do it, but you can't. This is a new generation of legal services where we know and we continue to engage on this. And so I'm really grateful that you could join us in today. My name is Linda Bonyo. I want to thank Ken and Louisa and the team for making this happen, including Emmanuel. Thank you for everyone who contributed to this discussion, and our amazing panelists who joined us today: Rikesh Futa, Dr. Suraj Judo, Muhammad Sokir. Thank you for joining us today. If you can just clap digitally for them, we really appreciate your time and your expertise. And we will come to Mauritius. If you haven't traveled to Mauritius, including myself, I've been invited several times, but I didn't go. Please, let's go to Mauritius. And if you have a company and you have further questions, connect with our speakers and let them tell you what the landscape looks like. That's the bell that says it is top of the hour. Today we're on time. There's still people who are raising their hands to speak, but unfortunately will not have it today. We'll have the link on for a few minutes for you to follow the chat, to connect with people on LinkedIn, and then we'll have it off, I think, by 6 minutes after. So thanks for joining us from the Lawyers Hub. We're grateful that you could. See you next Monday at the same time on AI Policy. Bye-bye.